Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models, episode 50. I'm Steve Kwan.
I'm Matt Kwan.
And coming to you live, our very special guest.
For the 50th episode, Mr. Robert Biernacki.
From the internet, the world famous, or at least the Vancouver famous Rob Biernacki.
The somewhat YouTube jiu-jitsu community famous.
The YouTube sensation, Rob Biernacki.
Yeah. Creator of Island Top Team, BJJConcepts.net, the BJJ Formula, and Modern Leg Lock Formula.
And the innovator of Canadian
newly,
taint grappling, too.
That's right. The Turks have that one where they oil up and grab each other around down the pants. You have the taint.
Yeah, it's your magnum opus. You will. It's going to be on your tombstone. The innovator of Canadian taint grappling.
And I should say the new instructional, you have the submission formula.
Submission formula, yeah.
And also, probably most relevant to this podcast, Bats Professor.
Yeah, that's right.
It's what I'm going to be most famous for when all the chips are counted at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Rob, for those who don't know you, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
How far back do you want me to go?
Birth.
I was born in parts unknown about 77 years ago.
Like a professional wrestler. You're coming from parts unknown.
Yeah. I suppose my only relevant history is that jiu-jitsu-wise, I spent a lot of time training MMA and no-gi, and didn't pick up the gi till very late in my jiu-jitsu career, which forced me to try to come up with a more efficient way to learn jiu-jitsu. That's where the systems come from. That's where the concepts come from. That's where all the alignment stuff, base posture, structure, frames and levers, et cetera, that comes from my desire to be able to fairly quickly rank up in the gi, and the idea of randomly learning and memorizing all of the techniques in the gi, because there are so many more of them. Like as a no-gi guy moving to the gi, trying to learn every individual gi technique, oh man.
It's an unwinnable battle,
totally unwinnable. And so trying to translate what was existing about my grappling, systematizing that, and then creating systems for other people to learn in a similarly efficient manner is how I came about creating some of this stuff, with a huge dollop of influence from obviously guys like Ryan Hall and anybody else who pushes conceptual jiu-jitsu. But I would say that Ryan Hall, more than anything, is the sort of the giant whose shoulders I stand on in my jiu-jitsu.
So would you say that because you trained with Ryan Hall for like a week, right?
Couple weeks.
You visited him, right, and trained with him. So would you say that after that experience, that was kind of the catalyst that from then on you looked at grappling from a conceptual approach?
I would say earlier than that. I was exposed to, I think like most people, to Ryan's material through like YouTube and through his instructionals. So even like I made it a mission, like basically the first time that I saw Ryan Hall teach or speak about jiu-jitsu, it was like a light bulb going off. It was very much like, this is the first person who's speaking about jiu-jitsu in the way that I would like to think about jiu-jitsu. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I am going to train with that guy at some point. So
got it. Cool. Makes sense. So the thing that you're probably most known for the people out there who are listening, you're known for all of the awesome apps and instructionals that you've made, particularly the ones in conjunction with Stefan Kesting.
Yep.
And you're also known for the BJJ Concepts Online Academy.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about that for those who aren't familiar with those?
Which one do you want me to start with?
Whatever makes sense.
Well, let's start at the start. So I've been working with Stefan Kesting for about 4 years now.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think 2015 was when we would have filmed the BJJ Formula, which that was kind of like the thing that really, like, if you've heard of me, it's because of that. There might have been a few people that heard him or saw me on YouTube. There might have been a few people in like the Vancouver jiu-jitsu community that might have seen me at tournaments screaming at people, going blue in the face. Not necessarily things you want to be famous for. Whereas my probably biggest introduction to the overall like internet jiu-jitsu community would have been the podcast that I did with Stefan to introduce me, and then the instructional, the BJJ Formula, which outlined my kind of approach to jiu-jitsu, the whole idea of alignment, of base posture, structure, frames and levers, having a set of core concepts that is the underlying template for jiu-jitsu, and then elaborating on that with the bottom game, top game, and back control stuff that we included in the BJJ Formula. So that's kind of how everything started. And then and really just like in terms of how I guess my presence in the jiu-jitsu community, that is very much how, if I had to choose, I would want to be known for that. As like, I'm the guy who teaches a bunch of concepts, tries to be really, really detailed with the actual techniques themselves. Like aside from using Ryan Hall as a template for building conceptual jiu-jitsu, I try to train with the best guys out there at any given aspect of the game. And so like the one half of it is the concept stuff. The other half of it is trying to bring the highest level of detail and technique to whatever I bring. And I think that's kind of what the BJJ formula introduced to the community.
Yeah, definitely.
And you plagiarized that from Danaher, right?
No, it was the leg lock stuff that I plagiarized from Danaher.
Yeah, get it straight. So yeah, for me, when you put out the BJJ Core Formula DVD, that was really my first exposure to your alignment framework. And when Matt and I started this podcast, I mean, the whole concept of this podcast is to talk about systems thinking for jiu-jitsu and mental models for jiu-jitsu. Yeah. There's way too much content out there that is very step-by-step instructional. The thing that really resonated with me about your instructionals is that whereas most people are talking about the what or maybe the how, you're talking about the why. And I think that is so instrumental for anyone who wants to really, really accelerate their learning. I mean, I'm not saying that you're not ever going to get good at jiu-jitsu if you just try to throw 1,000 techniques into your brain, but you're going to get a lot better at it a lot faster if you have a systematized approach to learning. And for myself, that's super important because as a casual guy, my time on the mats is quite limited. I mean, I can't put in 8 hours a day training like someone who does this for a living. So I've got to maximize every minute I have on the mats if I want to get good. The first episode that we did was about alignment because we felt that out of all of the things that we could talk about in terms of jiu-jitsu mental models, alignment was probably the best place to start from square one. I mean, if someone rolls into my academy, the first thing I'm going to explain to them before I talk about even what the guard is, I'm going to say, you need to understand what this alignment thing is because everything that we're going to talk about for the rest of your life is going to hang off of that framework. So it's a very, very critical thing to know from step one. Now, in terms of our episodes, to this day, episode 1 that we did on alignment is by far the episode with the greatest listenership we have. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 times higher than any other episode we've ever done. And that's unfortunate.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. That is unfortunate, though, because at the time, Matt and I had no idea what we were doing with podcasting. We were like...
I still don't know. You do everything, really.
It was basically like in terms of like quality, it was like a Skype call. I mean, a lot of people tell us it was a great episode, but I feel like we could have done a lot better. And now that we kind of have a routine and a rhythm to this podcast, and now that we've got you here, we thought for all of the people who haven't been listening since day one, for all of the new listeners, it would be awesome to maybe reapproach this concept and explain alignment with someone who actually knows what the hell they're talking about.
Thank you. But before we do that, can I just touch on a point that you made earlier on about what you mentioned is like as a hobbyist, your time is so finite on the mats that you want to be as efficient with your learning. And that's something that I really want to like just touch on because one of the, I don't want to call it, because it's not a legitimate criticism, but anytime somebody wants to criticize like high level people in jiu-jitsu, one of the criticisms is, oh, well, that's because you're like a full-time grappler, you're a competitor, you're an elite this, you're an elite that. So, you know, you can't have the same standards as someone who's just a hobbyist who comes in once in a while. And like, I don't want to get into that because like I find that people who make that argument are being disingenuous about it. But what I like, the point that I kind of want to address is that it's even more important for somebody who is a hobbyist to find good instruction and good methodology, because if you're doing something for fun, things are more fun when you're good at them.
Yeah.
Right? Like if
there's joy in mastery.
Like there's this excuse that people want to give for like shitty jiu-jitsu instruction where it's like, well, so what? He's just teaching hobbyists.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's okay to give people who are making this like their fun thing that they want to do and have them be shitty at it. And that's okay somehow. So I don't agree with that, because I think if you're a competitor, if you're going to make your life jiu-jitsu and you're going to be full-time, you're going to get good kind of no matter what.
Yeah.
Right? Like I've seen some awful garbage schools actually produce decent guys who they just trained all the damn time.
Just by ramming your head into the wall.
Exactly. Eventually, if you super commit, and then eventually that guy will go to a more legit school. And then eventually, if his ambition is high enough, that guy or that girl, they'll go to Atos, or they'll go to Kaios, or they'll go to Danaher, or whatever. Like you will eventually find, like almost regardless of the level of instruction you start with, you'll find your way. If you're just the person who trains once in a while and you get bunk instruction, you can be 10 years into jiu-jitsu and you'll get that black belt wrapped around your waist and you'll be a glorified blue belt.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real shame because the methodology is out there, whether like even if you don't have access to it at your school, if you just go out there and find some of this kind of like conceptual instruction that allows you to understand jiu-jitsu better and also allows you a template for judging quality. One of the biggest things we talk about aside from the concepts is this idea of false positives and holding yourself to a higher standard and recognizing what actually really works at high levels and just training yourself to that. And regardless of where you end up on the scale of like global skill in grappling, you'll just be a happier person because you're not being sold horseshit.
Yeah.
Now, very few people are happy to be sold horseshit, so much so that they'll lie to themselves about it to like reduce the cognitive dissonance when they discover that they've been receiving horseshit.
Well, I think that's actually a reason why a lot of people will say like, I'm a hobbyist, and they say that almost as an excuse.
Yeah,
right?
it's a self-deprecating thing.
Yeah, they're using it as a defense mechanism to justify why they're not getting as good as they want to be.
Yes.
And I mean, yeah, to some extent, if someone trains literally 10 times more than you, they'll probably get better. But
of course,
if you minimize your time on the mat, that doesn't mean you have to be bad. It just means that you have to really pick your shots and make them count.
Absolutely.
I mean, the example that I give is like in the workplace. If someone is bragging about how hard they work, like I worked 100 hours this week and I got the job done. It's like, well, I don't know why you're bragging about this because if the other dude did the same job in 10 hours, like why am I supposed to be impressed that you overextended yourself and achieved basically nothing out of it? You should always be more impressed with the people who can do more with less. That's efficiency. And that's ultimately what jiu-jitsu is about.
Yeah.
You know, Danaher has an instructional series called Go Further Faster. Coincidence?
Yeah. But I mean, he's selling some of the same stuff that I'm selling in that sense that anyone who's selling, you know, that Ryan Hall is selling, that anyone is selling, which is that you don't have to bang your head against the wall. You know, we can get into whether or not like the runtime of somebody's instructionals are padded and the cost is justified and all that kind of stuff. But really, anybody who's never been exposed to conceptual or systematized instruction will absolutely go further faster with just understanding why the hell you're doing some of the stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, I've seen countless people come into my school, and then just as I explain them the concepts and the stuff that you talk about, like I always start with posture structure base. That's kind of the number one thing because it's just such a good foundation. Because otherwise, where do you start, right? Like if you're gonna say, okay, here's an arm bar, then you're like, okay, where would I do that? When would I do that? Why are we in missionary position? And like, what is this? But if I just tell you like, this is how your body is built, this is what makes you vulnerable, this is how you prevent vulnerability, it's such a good place to start. So like, I don't know about you. I mean, I'm sure you've seen hundreds of people just have this moment, but like where the light bulbs go off in their head and they're like, oh, okay, this is way simpler than just memorizing moves.
Yeah. Well, the thing about that's interesting is the biggest light bulb moments that I see are actually from really experienced people. Somebody who comes in from day one.
Someone who's got a game and they're good, and then you add this to
and then you add this because for one, it automatically, once they start like internalizing it automatically makes everything you do better. Whatever moves you know how to do, it just makes it better.
Yeah, it's a force multiplier, right?
Totally.
It's more simple.
Simple, yeah. And for the people that are new, it's like an inoculation against bad jiu-jitsu. Once you understand alignment, it's going to be really hard for you to go on Instagram or YouTube and see something that's just nonsense.
It's true.
It's like
it's a filter.
It's a filter, exactly. So, and it's a legitimate filter. It's not like the Helio filter, which is made up marketing nonsense.
Come on.
Hey. Now, I'll have you know, it has been like at least 5 episodes. At least 5 episodes since we've made fun of Helio.
Oh, okay.
So you're going to have to tone down there, sir.
He would have been a purple belt world champion. Come on.
But yeah, like it inoculates people against like just the kind of nonsense that people try to put out there as being like, oh, here's a move you could do. And then, you know, if you call someone on it, like, well, you know, anything could happen. Like, yeah, but we're talking about percentages.
Yeah.
Anything
exactly.
could,
Yeah. I mean, there's some moves that, hey, like they might not be technically sound, but if you're against inferior competition and you're strong enough, you can maybe make them work. And alignment is a really good signal to noise filter there that allows you to immediately identify to what extent a technique is fundamentally sound. And the thing that I think is just completely overwhelming for a lot of people who start jiu-jitsu is there is just so much information out there, and every technique has infinite variations. So it's very hard as a new person to really assess and evaluate what is going to work in against quality opposition.
Because it all looks like magic if you don't know what alignment is.
And so much of jiu-jitsu is not seeing it, but it's feeling it, right? It's feeling having it done to you and doing it to someone else. And if you don't understand why you're doing it, then it's a lot harder to just look at like someone doing an armbar and know what's good and what's bad about it. Back to your point though about just the sheer number of techniques out there. We've talked about this in the past, Matt, where the example I give as to why alignment is important or systems thinking is important is I just ask, like, think back to when you were in high school. How much of that do you really remember? Because I'm sure everyone crammed like crazy for tests, and you tried to just stuff a million facts into your head and then regurgitate them onto the exam. And how much of that did you really retain? Just memorization by volume has never been an effective learning approach. That is basically just known, right? You're far better off starting off with understanding why things happened. And then from there, human beings are storytellers. If you know the story of why something is important, all of the details come together a lot easier. I've also found too that if you understand why things are happening, it gives you more freedom to be creative, because that's where jiu-jitsu really becomes a form of self-expression. If you understand the fundamentals at an ingrained level and why these movements matter, you can freestyle it. You can make stuff up on the fly that is fundamentally sound. And that kind of on-the-spot creativity is so important to get someone who's really good.
Absolutely.
You're always going to be fighting people who are new and you don't know what they're going to do. And so sometimes you're going to see situations that have never come up before. And your ability to understand fundamental movements is what's going to get you through.
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental problems that we have in jiu-jitsu, and this isn't just in jiu-jitsu, I think this is a society-wide thing, is that people really misunderstand creativity.
Yes.
They tend to think that creativity just, for one, it's innate, that it can't be developed, or someone's just creative. And the association is that people who are creative tend to be, wacky and free-thinking and all that kind of stuff. When really, if you see like truly creative people who create great art, people who create great anything, there's a tremendous amount of learning and fundamental understanding that goes into
process.
And
yeah, that's the thing that a lot of people I think misunderstand. It's not just a matter of being creative and having these bursts of insight. I mean, creativity is a process, and those moments of greatness come from a system that people build and process over time.
Exactly. Yeah, and so I think it's a disservice, again, people who are trying to, like, let's say, undermine this type of approach, because let's be honest, the state of instruction, you talked about, learning in high school, like the level of pedagogy in high school is pretty low. There's not a high standard of learning in high school. We could get into why on a different podcast, but it's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. Like the level of pedagogy from school to school is abysmally low. And so because we're trying to put out something that's A, better, B, different, there's going to be some pushback. And the pushback that you get, one of the sort of like false narratives or false arguments against learning this kind of concept or system is that it undermines creativity, because you're like, well, you've got to follow the system. Well, you've got to follow this. No, what we're giving you is a basic framework. And on top of that framework, you can build your own creativity. Like I use my school as an example, and you guys will know this from having trained with my black belts, Cal and Rory. Do they roll anything like each other? Like, other than certain fundamental movement things, alignment things, in terms of style, they couldn't be more different.
Other than Cal's good and Rory sucks?
Yeah, exactly. Besides that.
I know. Rory, the only thing I know, I've never actually sparred with Rory, but I imagine it must be like sparring with a brontosaurus. Because he's like 7 feet tall, he's lanky as hell, and I mean...
Yeah, maybe a pterodactyl would be a better, just because of that really long head.
He looks like Macaulay Culkin grew 2 feet from Home Alone and got AIDS. So.
I was going to say he looks like Macaulay Culkin had a child with a guppy fish.
All right, so
back on track.
Back on track.
I can't wait until one day Rory comes on this podcast. Just craps all over us. Anyway,
the idea is that no two grapplers, like higher level grapplers that come out of my academy, are all that alike in terms of what they gravitate towards. But what they do have is certain traits in common. They're very difficult to sweep. They've got excellent defense in certain things. They're very good at responding on the fly to things they haven't seen before. So it's difficult to like put them in a scenario that, oh, whoa, man, I've never seen that sweep, therefore I'm going to fall over.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's the biggest
And that's
problem.
creativity. Like people don't realize that is creativity. That is them being put in scenarios over and over again that force them to access the creative part of their brain.
Yeah.
And develop a solution on the fly based on the concepts that they've learned. So I think that really understanding, to be truly creative in any endeavor, you have to really understand it. It's like nobody tries to pull this in physics. No one's like, hey, you don't really know anything about, quantum. You don't know the standard model. You don't know any of this. just free ball, man. You'll come up with something great, right? Like that's garbage, right?
Yeah.
But you know, in other fields where we do have people who, frankly, don't want to earn their way to the top. They just want to pretend that creativity is a side door. It's like, I don't have to actually be good. I'll just be creative.
Yeah.
And so like I think it's really important to understand that what we're giving people are the tools to actually access whatever creativity they might potentially have in a much better way than they would otherwise.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes on the matter, I think it was from Quincy Jones, is he said, you've got to have a solid foundation and a flexible perimeter. And that's kind of how I interpret this.
Very good way of putting it.
Like your fundamentals and your innate understanding of the mechanics needs to be rock solid. And that should be basically the same for everyone. And everything above and beyond that is a matter of self-expression, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that way when you're like a 1-month white belt, but eventually once you start to really understand things, you realize how unimportant it actually is to memorize techniques step by step. And I think that, my criticism of most instructors out there, and I would guess that well over 90% of instructors teach this way, is they have technique of the week. You come in and there's a move that you do and you bang out a few reps against an unresisting opponent, and then you move on to something else. And the students are never able to successfully pull those techniques off in a live roll.
Yeah.
Whereas if you actually come up things from the top down, and rather than telling people to memorize steps, you explain the ideas, that gives people the creativity and the ability on the fly to adapt their strategy to a resisting opponent, which is so crucial because you can never truly know exactly how your opponent is going to resist in the moment.
Yeah. Well, and not only that. So one of the big things that I try to convey to new students is like appropriate goals, because the thing that most people come into jiu-jitsu with is this fantasy notion that within, like depending on the person, it might be a few weeks, might be a few months, they're going to be submitting people left and right. Like people walk into a jiu-jitsu club, it's usually one of the first techniques they learn is an arm bar from the guard or a triangle, like a submission.
Yeah.
And so what I try to convey to people is like, honestly, you need to forget about submissions. Like a submission is the jiu-jitsu equivalent of like maybe a guitar solo. Like, hey, I just picked up a guitar. Let me try to do a solo. Like, no, God, no. Like
it's the period at the end of the sentence, right?
What you need to do is understand how to control your own body. And that's why we start with alignment. Alignment teaches you what your body needs to be doing at all times in any physical endeavor, not just jiu-jitsu, to be effective and safe and efficient. And so if you start with alignment with your body, learn to control your body, and then learn to control someone else's body, then after you can do those two things, then you can start worrying about submissions, because one, you'll be doing them properly, and two, you'll be doing them safely. And those are kind of, inherently intertwined. But what that does is it creates a scenario where somebody leaves class every day having actually had like small victories, right? So if you come in wanting to get a submission on someone and you spend the first 3 months of class never ever submitting someone, you're going to feel like a failure every single time you leave class. And that takes away the fun. Whereas if you come in and you're like, oh man, I recognize that someone grabbed my head and that broke my posture. So I grabbed their arm, which is the end of a lever, pulled it off of my head and fixed my posture, which fixed my alignment. So, and I mean, anybody can do that. Not anybody can come in and submit someone within their first few weeks of training, unless they're just, like a super athlete, way bigger than everyone, et cetera, et cetera. There are exceptions, but for the most part, most people can't do it. So by giving you this alignment concept, we allow, and understanding the idea of small or intermediate and long range goals, you can leave every class feeling like, I'm getting it a little bit more, even though you're still objectively getting crushed in all of your roles. Every time you come back, like, oh yeah, I got that. So it's important, not just from a long-term perspective of understanding and improving your jiu-jitsu. It's important from a short-term perspective of enjoyment and sticking with jiu-jitsu.
That's a really good point, Matt. We were talking about the other day, which is like, how do you define success in jiu-jitsu? And at the more junior ranks, usually when you go onto the mat, your quote-unquote goal for the day might be like, I want to submit people. And that's kind of how you determine your performance when you're reflecting afterwards. But that's not really an effective way to determine how you performed. Really, what is more important is, did I maintain my alignment? Was I able to create predictable scenarios, right? Like if you are getting a submission 20% of the time and losing position 80% of the time, that is not a predictable scenario.
Yeah.
You know, what I want is when I go
Well, it's predictably bad.
Yeah. What I want is when I go into class, I don't care if I get a submission or not, but I want to know that 95% of the time the game goes the way that I want it to go and I can stay out of trouble. That is far more important than pulling out some crazy gi choke or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So maybe now this is a good time to transition into this. I mean, what exactly is this alignment framework that you've put together? How exactly is this defined and how does it apply to on-the-ground jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, okay, so basically if you look at the way that the universe is structured, there are a bunch of constellations out there. There's like 12 of them. And they determine how you're going to act in life. No, sorry.
I was wondering where the hell this was going for a second.
Okay. It's rare that I get a chance to shit on pseudoscience. Actually, no, it's not rare. I try to do it like every opportunity in my life. So that's the astrology shot out of the way. Yeah, so we've got there's a basic alignment to your body when it comes to generating force. We use the terms in jiu-jitsu base, posture, and structure, and like people have heard these terms and they don't always have good definitions for them. So we refer to alignment, good alignment, as having proper base, posture, and structure. Any physical activity you perform, whether it's jiu-jitsu or another sport, or I can give you a stupid an example is like moving a fridge. If you want to move a fridge and not like hurt your back, there's a way to position your body to do it.
So you would not lift with your arms, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So when we break alignment down into base, posture, and structure, one of the things we do a lot is break things into threes. One, it's kind of a good mnemonic device, and two, if you don't sub-systematize certain things, you can get kind of in the weeds with definitions. So alignment is made up of base, posture, and structure. Base is the foundation of everything. It's a platform from which to apply and absorb force, specifically maximal force. So if you can't generate 100% of the force your body is capable of into your opponent, then you don't have optimal base. If you want to be really reductive, we can go into like base being another like mathematical factor. So you could have 0.1 base and 0.2, like you could have really shitty base to okay base to really good base. But to really have proper base, you need to be able to generate maximum force and absorb your opponent's maximal force production. Like being able to generate force is great, but if at any point I can't stop you from I can't always reduce your alignment. I can't always count on the fact that I can take away your ability to generate maximal force. So I have to always be able to absorb the maximum force production that my opponent is capable of. So that's our base. And then it's important to note that base is relative to your opponent and it's relative to your goals, because people tend to reduce base too much to like being wide and hard to sweep and difficult to move. And they've got all these kind of vague terms for it that are byproducts of good base, but they're not necessarily base. So if my base is relative to my opponent, I need to be able to generate force in their direction and receive force in the direction that they're giving. And it's relative to my goals. So, if my goal is to, I usually give the example is like, if my goal is to disentangle from a leg entanglement, it may actually serve me better to lay flat on my back and push the foot off the hip than it would to get back up onto my feet. So being in base doesn't always mean being on your feet. It means being able to generate and absorb force.
So even on the bottom, you can have
base. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm really glad that you're defining this, because this is something that until you defined it, I realized that in my 12-year career, no one has ever defined base. I've just always been told, get base, make sure you've got base. And I mean, subconsciously, I kind of interpreted that to mean like, okay, I've got my feet on the ground, but that's not really what base
it's
means.
not. And that's it's interesting that you bring that up, because what I used to do in seminars is like before I presented the information, I would pick the highest ranked guy in the room, and it would be a brown belt or a black belt, and I'd be like, everyone knows what base is, right? And I'm like, okay, you tell me what base is. And they would stammer and struggle. And so I actually stopped doing it, because it ended up being like, I'm not trying to embarrass anyone, right? And so I don't want to put people
except for astrologists. Apparently.
Well, yeah, I want to embarrass people who believe stupid shit for no reason in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, because people like that in society need to be embarrassed. So the function of teaching something like that is not to embarrass someone, but you'd be surprised how few people had a good definition for base. So that's our definition. It doesn't have to be being on your feet. It's the ability to generate and absorb force.
So the idea is like the way that I like to think of base is like, if, when you're kind of like a sprinter, you're loading, before you get going, you're loading up on your feet to generate a lot of force right away.
Exactly.
That foot placement allows you to generate force in one direction. And similarly too, in jiu-jitsu context, if someone pushes or pulls you in any direction, if that push or pull is going to result in you falling backwards or forwards, that means you don't really have base. Like you should be a strong structure that can kind of, that can manipulate and move your own body weight so that no individual burst of force from your opponent is going to knock you over. To me, that's kind of how I define base.
Exactly. Yeah. So like good base has a mobility element and a stability element. And then again, depending on what your goal is at the time, you're going to kind of adjust which one of those is more important, right? Like if you're using the sprinter example, a sprinter isn't going to have somebody run up to him and shove him over from the side.
Yeah.
So they only need to worry about generating force like in a linear fashion down the track. So it simplifies base. And so base can be quite simple under certain circumstances. The more complicated, the more like different variables there tend to be, the more we have to start looking at, okay, what do I need more? Do I need to be really stable right now? Okay, maybe it's better to spread out.
Yeah.
Do I need to be super mobile right now? Okay, well, maybe I don't need to be as spread out. I need to be able to move laterally more. I need to be able to twist, et cetera, et cetera. So we can give you a really simple definition that kind of covers everything, and then we can get more into the weeds depending on the necessities of the scenario.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Hey, where did you get, like, when did you develop your system and then had that like light bulb go off in your head and be like, okay, I'm gonna make the foundation of my system these three concepts: posture, structure, base. Like I think that I can run with this and I can use this. This is it.
So the base and posture and structure stuff does come from Ryan Hall, like that foundation, and to a lesser degree the idea of frames and levers. Also, like just hearing him like, hey, this is just the end of a lever. I'm like, right, it is. No shit. Yeah, like so the sort of the seed of everything that we do at Island Top Team or BJJconcepts.net does come from Ryan Hall's material. What I've tried to do, and like I've gotten a lot of really complimentary feedback on this, where I think it is really important to emphasize how much of anything that any of us are putting out there, how much of it comes from other sources and how much of it, like I try to, anytime I teach anything, I'm like, oh, I got this from that guy or I got that from that guy. And like,
not a lot of our mental models come from you.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Like
and so
we discuss on the podcast is really original. It's all gathered from other sources.
So like I can't put a number on like what percentage of like the foundational stuff comes from Ryan Hall. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 70%, maybe it's 40%. Like obviously I've never sat down and like done the math, but that original kind of idea of like, this is the hallmark of it. So I just like Ryan Hall's terminology was base is a platform from which to apply force. That's kind of where I got it. So like I've added to it along the way, little things here. Okay, modifying it. So okay, you also need to absorb force. Okay, now we also need to like subdefine it as to being relative to your goals. And so those are things that I added. But like that whole seed of base, posture, structure, and then the idea of frames and levers and using those things to affect base, posture, structure, the genesis of that just comes from Ryan Hall.
Got it. Okay, so we talked about base, but that's just one of these three principles here. What would posture be then? I mean, this is another thing where you're always told have good posture.
Or posture up.
Yeah, or posture up. But most people probably could not actually explain mechanically what that means.
Yeah, so posture is the integrity of your spinal column, which is different than saying keep your spine straight, because that's what it usually gets reduced to. People are like, just keep your spine straight.
But sometimes your spine, you're going to be inverted.
Yeah, sometimes it needs to curve, right? And as long as it's a biomechanically sound and safe way of curving your spine, that's totally okay, right? Like I'm not qualified to get into like the engineering principles of like bridges and how, curvature and parabolic arcs and stuff like that. But like those are all still like sound structures in physics. So primarily, yes, you want your spine straight because that's the easiest way, like relatively straight. That is the easiest way to maintain the integrity of your spinal column. So most people know not to let their head get bent or twisted, and that is an important part of posture. What usually most people are not as familiar with, or they miss a little bit, is the idea of your spine can be perfectly straight, but if it's twisted up, so if your hips and shoulders are pointed in opposite directions, that's really bad for your posture.
Right.
I usually give the analogy of like if you're on a flat bench and you're trying to bench press, where would you put your feet, your hips? Like, would you twist your hips to the side like a yoga pose and then try to do a max lift on the bench? Of course not. Like,
it's funny you mentioned that, because that's the exact example that Matt and I gave, which is like if you try to bench press, if you just do something as simple as turn your head to the side, it can dramatically increase your chance of injury and reduce your maximum lift, right? Yeah,
exactly. So, the same thing like when it comes to doing a squat. If you start curving your spine up, God help you. You're going to hurt yourself really badly. So that's what posture is. It's the integrity of your spinal column. And again, it is relative to the situation. So like the spine is probably, unless you're like genetically quite abnormal, it's probably the longest lever in the body.
Like me.
Yeah. Well, some people have really short torsos and long limbs and stuff like that. So like Rory probably. His fucking head by itself is probably longer than his spine. But we got to get him to listen to this.
You've seen a lot of the top of it.
Oh, man. So I'm trying to like decide between rolling with this and full on going into the whole blowjob thing or not. So the idea is that you want to maintain the integrity of your spinal column as an adjunct to your base, because if you compromise the integrity of your spine, then what you're left with is just using your like isolated muscle structures to try to achieve a goal. And the thing about that is there are some people who are diesel fucking strong. And they can still do it. Like there are guys that'll like key lock you despite having shitty alignment. And so, there's a conversation about false positives that we can get into another time. But it's really important to understand that not just from the perspective of effective jiu-jitsu in terms of like submitting someone, in terms of keeping yourself safe and not getting injured. One of the most common injuries I see, and despite best efforts to the contrary, really strong guys make this mistake all the time, which is they're getting arm barred and then they rotate their torso super hard to try to like yard their arm out. And because like especially really muscular guys tend to be a lot like their muscles are not pliable, right? Like people who do a bunch of yoga, they're bendy. People who just lift a lot of weights tend to be way stiff. And so when they twist super hard, they pop their ribs or they pull a rib muscle. Like I'd say for big guys, that's one of the more common injuries is they just immediately break their posture to try to yard out of an arm bar. And that's a really good example of like, if you just try to stay in alignment all the time, the odds that you ever get injured in jiu-jitsu,
unless dramatically down.
Like massive reduction in injury rate. And like again, the more mat time you get, the better you're going to get. So all this kind of stuff about like not worrying about the end result of the submission happening or not happening. It's just stay in alignment and you'll be safe. Whether you get tapped or not is irrelevant.
Staying in alignment, I think, is really the best defense against submission and injury. Like
totally.
And to your point about mat time, like one of the worst ways to reduce your mat time is get injured. If you get injured, you're off the mats. But if you can stay safe, you're just going to get more mat time, and that's going to allow you to eventually lap some of the people who are constantly taking themselves out of the game by injuring themselves.
Totally, I would agree with that. And so that's where posture comes in, and especially if we're talking about injuries. Like spinal injuries, any injury of that nature is going to be extremely serious. So maintaining the integrity of your spinal column, much more so than like when we'll talk about structure in a minute, but like structure refers to our limbs. So like, if I get an elbow pop, that's not a big deal. If I get a like herniated disc in my neck, that's a huge deal. That's not something I can just like sit out for a couple of weeks and it'll be fine.
That's a good point, which is that posture related injuries, that basically means like your spine and your neck. And
basically
these are the injuries
from your head to your hips, I guess.
Yeah. These are the injuries that you really, really don't want.
Exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the way that I always the example I give for posture is, when you take side control and you do the shoulder of justice and you just cross face the guy until his head has to turn away. That's a very, very good example of a posture break. And anyone who's been in that situation knows how hard it is to escape when you cannot turn towards and face your opponent, but the rest of your body is pointing in the other direction.
Totally. And when we get into submissions, one of the most important things about like increasing your rate of finishing submissions is killing your opponent's posture as part of the submission. So like in the submission formula, that's something we emphasize quite a bit, which is if I'm trying to armbar you and the only emphasis I'm putting in is generating force into your elbow or controlling your arm, that's great. It's going to work. But if I take your posture away, it's not just my ability to do the submission, it's your ability to escape or negate the submission that's really compromised.
Yeah, I find that at the black belt level, getting submissions against someone like it's incredibly hard unless their alignment is just shattered. Like Matt and I were talking about this recently. Like, it's not enough to just get an arm bar and pull the arm back and lock it on. Like, you have to completely annihilate your opponent's alignment, or you have, if they're good, you have no chance of getting their submission unless you do that.
Yeah, I remember when I was a lower ranked practitioner, when I would try and finish chokes, I would just think that it was about like squeezing, right? You're like, I'm going to use my arms to squeeze. But if only I had someone back then to tell me, like, no, you actually want to, like, the squeeze is, what would you say? Like, maybe like 40% of how strong it is, like maybe even less. It's more about how you can break your opponent's posture so that they literally, they can't escape their head position, and then it drives the choke way stronger, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the squeeze, and the squeeze should be an isometric squeeze. Like, it's just, you just hold it. You don't keep increasing till you go blue in the face.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's the finals of something and you got to sell out or whatever. But like, if we're trying to be efficient with our technique, definitely it's just an isometric hold, and then the alignment breaks, and your alignment being solid, and things like maximizing the amount of PSI that you can generate into the choke, stuff like that, which actually has very little to do with your squeezing power, like from a muscular perspective, and more with just how efficiently you can transmit force into their neck.
It's interesting. It's often the little guys who are really deadly at chokes, right? And they don't necessarily have the most squeezing power. I mean, chokes are probably my most successful family of submissions, and I am hardly the strongest guy on the mat. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's again, I'm not going to name names here, but there are people who emphasize like working on your squeeze as being the way to get good at jiu-jitsu.
I know.
I mean, it's just not.
It's something, right? But it's not.
But it betrays a very low level of understanding of like the physics and biomechanics.
Yeah, there are more efficient ways to multiply your force for sure than just to try to just muscle your way through a submission. Yeah. Cool.
It's like Nicky Rod. If I can get under the eyebrows, he's going. It works for him.
No, and like none of these things, like, when I kind of I tend to use a little bit of hyperbole, especially when I teach inside my gym, because I take it for granted that if you're an adult, you have the ability to like think abstractly and have a bit of a sense of humor. So I occasionally use hyperbole and say, well, that's just garbage and it doesn't work. It doesn't mean that it literally doesn't work at all, right? Like, obviously there's a spectrum. I mean, if I would know anything, it's about being on a spectrum. Like, there's a spectrum to how effective something can be. And just because you occasionally get something to happen doesn't make it, valid on one end of the spectrum and invalid on another end. So like, yes, you can develop your squeeze and you can develop obscure bullshit submissions that will work once in a while. Yeah. And I'm not saying that is a 100% invalid approach. I'm saying that if you actually want to be good and efficient, it's not the best way to go about it.
Yeah. Matt, we've talked about this a lot where, at my level now, my focus is not on getting a submission. My focus is on probabilities. There is no technique that is 100% foolproof successful. And there will be situations where crazy weird things happen. Like, you might get caught in some bizarre pro wrestling submission, or a black belt might get tapped by a white belt. Like, it can happen. Nothing in a fight is guaranteed. And so when we learn these submissions, the goal is, like, we're never going to have things that are 100% successful. And if that's your expectation, you're going to be disappointed. But your goal in jiu-jitsu should be to make things as reliable and predictable as possible. I don't necessarily want to submit someone every time. I want to make sure that I'm in control 99.99% of the time. I want to get that percentage up as high as I can. It's a game of probabilities. So you're right that there's a whole bunch of false positives out there. I mean, there will be a lot of examples of just really beefy, jacked up guys who are able to power their way through submissions. That will work. Yep. But there are far more predictable ways of achieving your goals in jiu-jitsu than just trying to muscle through things. And I think that's the thing that people eventually need to learn when they really start thinking about things in terms of systems.
Yeah. And I mean, like, in general, as human beings, what our brains are really kind of supposed to be for is creating a map through which we can interpret the world. And so what we're trying to give people with an alignment, with the alignment concept, is just give you a more accurate and reliable map for interpreting the world. So, like, and I mean, this comes down to any number of activities where you can do the same thing. So for jiu-jitsu, the next step in the map is structure.
Yes,
there's a segue for you.
Wait, is it a map or a compass?
It would be a map.
What would the compass be?
That's a really good question.
Why do you say map?
Well, just like that's the easiest way to describe it.
I was trying to go all philosophical.
Yeah.
Well,
Rob
because
doesn't
the
wanna
more
play with us.
accurate a map, the better you can read it, whereas a compass could be fucked with by a magnet. The
Nice.
sounded
Sure.
really intelligent,
Nice.
didn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so
Just
structure.
blew everyone's mind. Okay, let's
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah, like the strong pull of an outside force could disrupt a compass, and that's definitely what happens to human beings and their brains. The strong pull of an outside force makes them think stupid shit. So yeah, structure. Structure is the efficient positioning of your limbs to achieve a goal. So structure is the element of alignment that changes the most, because base is fairly simple. Most of the time it means plant your feet or plant something really strong on the ground. Posture is pretty simple. Most of the time it means keep your spine relatively straight. Structure changes based on the scenario dramatically. So like if I want to frame someone to keep them off of me, I would stick my arm out bolt straight. If I wanted to defend an arm bar or avoid an arm bar, sticking my arm out bolt straight would be the last thing I want. So that's the only element of alignment that will change like completely depending on the scenario. So we say it's the efficient positioning of your limbs to achieve a goal. And so like a heuristic that we use for structure is whenever possible, use bone instead of muscle. But if you have to use muscle, use all the muscle available. Yeah. All right. So in the armbar defense example, I don't just want to do a bicep curl and hope that's enough muscle to prevent you from extending my arm.
You want to use overwhelming force.
I want to use my other arm.
All the parts of the
my
buffalo.
chest.
Like you want to use
my
everything.
leg. I want to use everything I can possibly engage. And at the same time, if I can possibly just stick my arm straight out and just have you lean, or stick my leg straight out, or just use my shin alone and have you lean on it, and I'm using zero muscular, or like as little muscular force as possible, and be efficient while you try to like in vain drive forward and pass my guard without any adjustments to your angle, then that would be really excellent structure.
Yeah, it makes sense. Cool. So
there you go. Base, posture, structure, working together, create alignment. And our goal is to maintain our alignment while reducing or completely eliminating our opponent's alignment.
Got it. So the interesting thing with alignment, I mean, we're talking about base, posture, and structure here together. This three-part thing is alignment. Yep. The interesting thing about alignment is like you can have those things even if you're on the bottom in a somewhat bad position. Like even when you're on bottom side control, you can have some degree of base, posture, and structure depending on the context, right? I mean, you might also be completely broken, but it is possible that in your goal on the bottom is to keep as much of it as you can.
Which is why I kind of object to the shorthand that is often used for jiu-jitsu, which is it's position before submission. Whereas my belief is that it's alignment before everything. Yeah. Right. And I actually was fortunate recently to do an article with Jiu-Jitsu Mag where I kind of gave this example of like alignment is the priority, because you can be in a bad position. When you look at guys who are excellent at escaping and evading once they're put in bad positions. Like again, let's use the like the Danaher guys and Gary Tunnen in particular, as far as them being really tough to submit in overtime and EBI and things like that, or just any scenario where you have a crack at submitting them. I would argue the reason that they're able to do that is because of fundamentally incredible alignment and the ability to change their alignment as necessary to respond, and obviously done through a tremendous amount of like drilling and practice and like high level training partners and coaching and all that kind of stuff. But when you see somebody who's good at defending and escaping things, they're demonstrating really good alignment. So the fact that you can maybe get to the side control or the mount or whatever is not as important, although it is highly important. Like if your goal is just to win, let's say, a points tournament, and I'm, just hopefully not giving any mistaken impressions here, in that I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to like points versus sub only versus EBI. Like I think there isn't an ideal rule set, and I think all of them have like serious flaws. If anything, I think sub only has more flaws for like for revealing good jiu-jitsu. But unless we're talking about like sub only, truly no time limit, go to the end, that's a different story. But like the sort of competitive sub only can, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, like reel me back in when I do that. But what if your goal is just to win and like, okay, I passed your guard, I got to mount, you can do that. But if your goal is to submit someone and you don't break their alignment, like you said, it's not just black belts, it's athletic guys. Get a guy who used to play rugby and give him 3 months of jiu-jitsu training and try and submit him. Right?
It's hard.
Like, it's really hard, because what they have and what most like good, when I say good, I mean like sports with a lot of like background in high level development. So like Olympic sports, sports that are played in the collegiate level, they tend to have a pretty good fundamental understanding of like athletics. What are athletics really? It's just alignment.
Yeah. How do I use my body?
Athletics are just like, how do I use my body with proper alignment? So if you take a guy who's just got really good understanding of how to move his body because he played, whatever, rugby or something like that, when you give him a few things in jiu-jitsu, like you said, it's a force multiplier.
Yeah.
People, they ascribe that to like, oh, the guy's just a good athlete. Well, no, the guy was educated in how to, like, yes, there are inherent athleticisms in different individuals. But that aside, if you take a guy who's played a high-level sport of any kind, like, have you ever rolled with Josh at our academy? Like, super tall guy. He just got his blue belt recently. He used to play professional rugby.
Possibly.
He's like 6'5", 220, 230.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
God help us.
Like, he is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Like,
how long has he trained for?
Oh, I mean, the dude barely shows up. Like, he comes to roll every once in a while. Like, comes to class here and there. And he is, like, no bullshit, probably the top 5 toughest rolls in my academy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there are guys that I know if I just, like, mind my P's and Q's, I'm not going to have any problems with. And then there's him where it's like, he can reach you from so far away and he can put his arm into, so like, I go to demonstrate Kimura control on him with like internal rotation, and I can
He just gets his alignment.
and I can barely hold it, and he can just like start to move out of it but that's just because he's also like, he never lets his shoulder get fully internally rotated.
He knows it feels bad.
He knows it feels bad, and so he fixes his alignment.
It's
right?
funny you mention that because when we've got a first day new white belt who comes in, you can tell to what extent they've done anything athletic before in the past. It's not even a matter of how big or strong they are.
No.
But some people, it's just like, man, I just can't grab or control this guy. But then other people, they're like newborn giraffes. They're just falling all over the place and they just can't keep their feet under them, right?
Yeah. So like that's like a really important thing to understand. Like, if you want to submit someone, or again, control someone and then get to the point of submitting him or her, then you've got this whole process of, if you don't get alignment, if you're just like, well, I got the position, I'm just going to submit you from here. Good luck to you. You mount someone who understands alignment.
They'll be out in like a second,
like,
right?
I mean, I'll say this, like, I'm definitely nowhere near the best grappler out there. Like, I'm an okay grappler. I certainly don't build my, I guess, success or like the impact that I'm trying to have on the jiu-jitsu community has nothing to do with me being any kind of like competitor or being able to out-grapple anyone at the high level, because I can't. I think I'm just contributing as a coach and maybe a thinker. But like, when it comes to actually like, something I can rest my like hat on as far as success as a grappler is, despite having trained with some of the best guys out there, I've been able to escape the mount with just about everybody I've ever rolled with.
Yeah.
Right. Regardless of size. Like, I've escaped the mount on 300-pound black belts. I've escaped the mount on multiple-time world champions. And it's just because I'm not sitting there thinking, let me try to do this escape.
Yeah.
Let me do an UPA and I'm going to roll. Like, let me trap and roll, so-and-so or
I
that
think the
guy.
fact that instructors teach that is like the mount escape.
Oh my God, it drives me crazy.
It is just an affront to dignity as far as I'm concerned. I can't deal with it.
And from a points point of view, you don't get anything for it.
No.
And you land your opponent in a scoring position.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I mean, again, not that it's like a bad move. It's that, like, in the depth chart, it should be like 3 or 4 on the list of mount escapes you should be learning. But again, like, the reason I'm able to escape the mount on guys who, let's face it, are in every way better grapplers than I am, is because all I'm worried about is, I'm going to hold on to my alignment and I'm going to wait until they break theirs. And people who get a little bit like greedy about submitting someone, they always break their alignment. Right? Like, the closer
we're talking about this too, Matt.
The closer they get to the end. Yeah, I haven't listened to the episode on greed, but I'm guessing you guys cover this extensively. Like, people see that like, oh, there's the end. If I just do so close.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, that is definitely a dynamic that, if you're not aware of it, if you're just a dude who's good at grappling and has memorized a bunch of moves, and you mount someone and that someone knows alignment, good luck. Like, I mount some people and, like, they're pretty good grapplers, but man, they're just desperate as hell. And it's the greed on the other side. They're like, I gotta get out of the mount. I've been told the mount is bad. I better spaz the fuck out, even though I'm a black belt.
Yeah.
And let me turn and do this and da-da-da. And you just like tap them really easily.
And no matter how good you are, everyone hits that breaking point eventually, right? If you can just keep your alignment and not let your opponent get anything on you, eventually they will get frustrated to the point where they get greedy and they make a mistake.
Yeah.
And this is something I found as a guy who's usually giving up a lot of weight and and strength and youth to the people in my gym is I can't control all aspects of their alignment most of the time, but I can control my own.
Yes.
And if I force them to be the first mover and to make a mistake or to expose a lever or something I can latch onto, then eventually I will get my opening. I don't have to pick up the guy and suplex him.
Yeah.
But what I can do is keep myself safe until an opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that sense, like being on the bottom, when like if I get mounted by somebody who understands this and they're just methodical and patient and they mount you, Jesus, the difference.
It's the worst.
It's the worst because they don't care. Like, I don't care if I armbar you. I don't care if I triangle you.
I will just suck the
I'm just
life
going
out
to
of
sit
you.
there. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to make little adjustments and make you eat all of my weight.
Yeah.
And I will constantly be accessing the levers on your body. I'm going to be accessing your spine. I'm going to be accessing your elbows and your wrists. And you're eventually going to give me something.
Yeah.
It's a whole different experience than having somebody on top of you who's like, yeah, I'm just going to try to armbar you.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
My professor does this to me all the time. And I think I finally started to adopt this strategy, which is, I used to want to like sweep, pass, and choke within 10 seconds if I could.
Yeah.
Now it's like, no, I'm going to take my time. The goal is not to get to that submission. The goal is to reduce the other person's odds of success to as close to zero as I can and just gradually suck the life and the energy out.
Well, and that's where the whole, like, if we're going to talk about sub only or points or anything like that, that's where when you introduce an artificial element, like time, well, not that time is artificial, but like the shortness of the time, like it's 5 minutes, it's 10 minutes, and then you make it to overtime, or you're up an advantage, so you're going to win because there's like, anytime you introduce that, you're introducing an incentive towards, frankly, like technically unsound. Well, no, technically unsound movement. Yeah. Like in the sense, like if I'm down points,
you're rolling the dice now, right?
And then I need to roll the dice either to get a submission or to get an escape.
Yeah.
And then the flip side is in sub only, which is that I've got zero incentive to try to escape because I'm going to make it to overtime. Yeah. And I've practiced my back control and my back escapes, and that's really all I'm good at.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're gaming the rules.
So basically, it doesn't matter. That's why sub only with the overtime is not the solution to points matches that end that are boring, that end in draws. It's just the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
Right. So like the only true expression of how good is your jiu-jitsu is no time limit sub only, and like not a lot of people are going to watch that, but there's definitely and again, and then if you want to take it even further, the only true expression of it is combat, which MMA is closest to, because in no time limit sub only, if you can't punch me and you mount me for 20 minutes and I'm just willing to sit there and not try to escape, that's still a pretty artificial kind of circumstance. So like, I know we're not really here to talk about that kind of stuff, but it's an interesting thing where you've got people who are like diehard supporters and believers in like, no, points is better, no, sub only is better, no time limit, so no, that's better. Guys, you're all wrong. No one of those things. And it's like, I feel like I have to do this with anybody who like has a certain political bent. And it's like, no, guys, you're all wrong. Everyone has some good solutions and everyone has some bad solutions. And as soon as you start being team sub only, you're compromising your thought process, or your team you're compromising your thought process.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on rule sets relatively recently, and kind of the conclusion that we came out with is like, look, there is really no right answer. It's just a matter of, hey, look, if I'm going to go into this rule set, every one of these is almost like a different sport, and right or wrong, I play to those rules. Knowing the rules is a massive competitive advantage, and playing to those rules is just as important as being the superior athlete. Like if you know how to work the rules,
for sure,
you can take out someone who is technically way better than you in every other way just by exploiting the rules. But to your point, I mean, every one of these rule sets has pros and cons, and I don't know if there is necessarily a right answer. The thing about submission only rule sets is I know that in theory it's supposed to be like more pure, but I agree with you that it leads to submission diving, right? Rather than trying to establish good alignment and establish high probabilities of success, it leads to a lot of dice rolling where it's like, I just want to get that flash submission and get this over with. Yeah. Or going to overtime so that you can then kind of game the whole rule system and win in a shootout.
Well, I find the whole argument from purity to be kind of an absurd argument, because like if we look at recent history, people who argue about purity of any kind are not the sort of people you want to associate with.
As they say,
like, it's pretty weak thinking.
As they say, only the Sith deal in absolutes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like what purity exactly are you talking about when we're talking about jiu-jitsu, right? Like, which is why, again, I'm such a big advocate of I'm just going to teach you alignment. I'm going to teach you how to grapple. I always tell people like, yeah, I'm a jiu-jitsu black belt, but I'm a grappling instructor. I'm trying to teach you how to control your body, how to control someone else's body.
You teach the foundation that will always be the same, and then you tailor to the rules.
Yeah.
Right?
So like when somebody comes to my gym and they're like, yeah, so like I'm from an IBJJF gym. I'm like, really? The IBJJF owns gyms now? But yeah, it does, right? Like it absolutely does. It's like I'm from a gym that teaches jiu-jitsu according to IBJJF rules.
I thought you meant like an IBJJF certified
but that's
gym.
what I'm really? That's kind of the point I'm making. It's like, really? You're from a gym that's like IBJJF? That's kind of silly. It's like, well, no, my gym that's the kind of jiu-jitsu we do. Like, that's kind of like, I mean, cool and all, but like, did you know about that when you signed up? Like, were you told that, hey, this is one version of how jiu-jitsu can be done, right?
Yeah, there's a whole wide universe out there.
Yeah, they usually don't present it that way. They're just like, no, come to our gym and learn jiu-jitsu and learn it for self-defense. And that's one of the main, and I don't think that's a big selling point, honestly. I think that's totally silly. Yeah, but
it's not self-defense.
I mean, that's maybe something we can talk about in the episode that we're going to do about like different gyms and stuff like that. But like, there's no reason to teach someone like, oh, like you won't hear people be like, yeah, I come from an 80cc gym, or I come from a Naga gym, or that kind of baffles me. It was like, yeah, we just do IBJJF rules here. I'm like, all right, so you're not really teaching jiu-jitsu, right? Like you're teaching a really specific rule set.
You're teaching a tailored version to win a particular family of sport is what it is. Like I think the thing is it is very, and we'll talk about this probably in the next episode, but people tend to get very dogmatic in terms of their jiu-jitsu thinking and their jiu-jitsu rule set.
Or thinking in general.
Yeah. And even if your intent is not to get that way, I mean, the reality is this is going to have weird ripple effects. Like, for example, if you train in a gym that is primarily in the gi, odds are because of the tournaments nearby you, you're going to favor IBJJF
rules for sure.
And that's going to mean that the people in your gym are likely, not always guaranteed, but likely going to be weak at leg locks and perhaps takedowns, right? I mean, these patterns do exist. And
frankly, they'll be weak at like high level submission finishing and defense, because that rule set does not promote again, what it promotes is people taking chances to negate certain things from scoring, which means if you're competing under the IBJJF rule set, you will expose your back in dangerous ways when someone's about to pass, which means you will get on someone's back easier than you would otherwise. And because they'll be so damn concerned about not letting you get the second hook, because that's the only way you can score points. Body triangle doesn't count. Crossed ankles doesn't count. It means you'll expose your neck. So what you're going to get is somebody who's really good at getting the back and finishing on someone who's taking an unnecessary risk, which is why, again, when you see in an EBI, you see like Danaher's guys or even the 10th Planet guys, and you see somebody who's really experienced at the IBJJF rule set, and they can't get a sniff of finishing someone from the back because those guys are good at not getting choked, because there isn't an artificial incentive to leave their neck out and defend that other hook. Right. So that's sort of like it's people tend to just categorize IBJJF guys as being weak at leg locks. It's not just that. There are other elements that they're foregoing to focus on that rule set.
And to your point, most new students, when they choose a gym, they probably don't know about this. I mean, like when I started jiu-jitsu, I didn't even know that IBJJF was a thing. But yet I wound up in the school that kind of funneled into that mindset. And that's fine. Like if your goal is to play and compete within that rule set, that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, totally.
But it should be something that you're consciously aware of and not just something that you're invisibly steered towards.
Well, and that's, again, something we'll probably touch on in the other episode, which is the idea of like, let people make an informed decision. So.
I think the main takeaway here, though, is that regardless of what flavor of jiu-jitsu you want to study, probably the best approach is learn alignment, learn that solid foundation, and then tailor it to whatever rule set you think is, you particularly want to compete in. Just be consciously aware of and understand what those rule sets are, because to your point, there will be some things that are incentivized or de-incentivized depending on the rule set.
Well, I think, I mean, if I have kind of a life's mission, it's to get more people to recognize that regardless of your goals, whether it's to compete in different rule sets of our sport, whether it's to apply jiu-jitsu as self-defense as a civilian, whether whether it's to apply it as a law enforcement officer in controlling suspects, whether it's just to do a hobby that you enjoy, whether it's to prevent injuries. Like, there is no aspect of jiu-jitsu that isn't dramatically enhanced by understanding it conceptually through alignment and frames and levers and stuff like that.
True.
Got it.
Yeah.
At my school, we generally, like, depending on if there's a competition to practice for a specific rule set or whatever, we generally go by the IBJJF model in terms of, like, you know, when I'm teaching, if I'm referring to things you should or shouldn't do, I generally refer to the IBJJF model. Like, you know, if you fall back for a foot lock, there's a good chance that you're going to end up on the bottom, which means you give up a sweep, blah, blah, blah. Like, I generally tend to put it through that lens. And then in no-gi class, I tend to teach it basically the IBJJF model with the addition of heel hooks. Like, I don't do like IBJJF for gi, ADCC for no gi. Like, I basically treat it all as the IBJJF point system, which allows reaps and heel hooks without the gi. So I'm just wondering, like, at your club, what would be sort of the default system that, or lens, not even system, I don't even like that word, but like lens that you would teach through?
I honestly don't do that. I mean, when we are preparing for specific competitions, I'll mention the particular rule set, the how the points work to the degree that I understand it, but I don't really do that. So, like, I'll mention ADCC rules, I'll mention EBI rules, I'll mention stuff like that. Again, I mentioned kind of at the beginning how some people who like to criticize not just the conceptual approach, but like higher level, but certainly, like, this has been a criticism that's been leveled at me personally, which is like, well, you know, Rob, the only reason your guys are good is because you're like a hardcore competition club. Like, are you though? I've never not at all. That's what the funny thing about that is, like, if you're going to use that as a criticism, like, dude, come to my gym. No one from my gym competes. We have, like, you know, we've got at this point about 120 adult students, of whom, like, right now we're getting ready for no-gi worlds. It's me, one of my black belts, and two of my blue belts. There are 4 people from my club going to no-gi worlds, and, like, we're doing it because it's gonna be kind of fun, and, like, one of the guys is taking it pretty seriously. He's doing some extra strength and conditioning. You know,
man,
like, you're
he's
right,
lifting heavy things, you know,
putting
like
them
back down again.
But, like, there's no one at my gym that's even close to what most like people would define as a full-time competitor. It's not even close, right? And, like, the closest we've ever had to it was, like, there was a 6-month period where one of my students was getting ready for ADCC trials, and that was the closest we've had to, like, a full-time guy. So, like, our gym is as far from a hardcore competition gym as it gets. Maybe the reason our guys are good is because they're actually being coached properly. And I don't assume that just because they're a hobbyist, they automatically have to suck at jiu-jitsu after doing it for 10 years. Like, that's probably more got to do with it than any kind of, like, competition approach, because that's just not how I train my guys. We don't have a comp class. We don't do a hard warm-up. We don't
have a get good class.
Yeah, right? We have it, like, show up to jiu-jitsu and I'm going to teach you some stuff and we're going to do it. Like, that's all we do. If anything, I need to be more to that. It's like, if I want my students to succeed at competition, I have to emphasize more, like, strength and conditioning and competition type stuff. I don't do it very much at all. From
my standpoint, whenever you create basically a class system within your own gym where you've got the competition team and you've got the hobbyists, or even if you've just got, like, the colored belts and the junior guys, whenever you do that, you create a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you're sending a message that these guys are expected to operate at different levels, and that is immediately going to drive a wedge right between your team. I think it's a really bad thing for gyms to do.
Again, something we should probably mention in
save it for the next episode, boys.
Good point. Well, one thing
Back
actually. So one thing on the topic of alignment that I wanted to actually get your input on, something that I've heard you talk about is the alignment game, or the alignment score. So why don't you talk a little bit about this? Because I found this to be a super helpful way to, like, measure whether I'm doing things right in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we mentioned the idea of it being in 3. So alignment is made up of base, posture, and structure, which adds up to 3. That's my score. My opponent has an alignment score as well. So they might have base, posture, and structure. They've got 3. My goal in any exchange is to make sure that my score is 3. If it's below 3, I don't try to do anything offensive, certainly, right? So, like, we can get really deep into the weeds on, like, how the score can work given a particular scenario, but the basic formula is I want 3, I want you to have less than 3.
So if you're ever in a situation, and this is probably an important distinction,
Yeah.
if you're ever in a situation where your alignment is 2 or less, you should not be focused on going on the offensive and taking your opponent's away. You got to get your own back first.
So
right?
when you see a lot of things fail in jiu-jitsu and people aren't sure why, it's like, man, I tried to armbar that guy and I didn't get the armbar and they passed my guard. And I need to get better at the armbar. It's like, nope, wrong. Dude. Like that is the worst possible lesson you could have gotten from that. The lesson was your alignment was shitty. You need to have proper alignment first. Then you need to break their alignment. And depending on what result you want, that's going to dictate how much of an alignment break you need to create. If it's 3-2, I probably wouldn't be trying to submit anybody unless I'm like significantly stronger, faster, better, etc. Really, at 3-2, I can start thinking about maybe sweeping you and possibly passing your guard.
Yeah.
And like other like intermediate goals that will allow me to advance in the positional hierarchy. At 3-1, I can think about like dominantly passing your guard. Like if I get you to 3-1, I'll pass right to mount.
Yeah.
Or getting like a pretty solid attack. Like there are certain submissions that you can definitely attack from 3-2, particularly if you have a really dominant position, so like the back.
Yeah.
But then for the most part, if I get it to 3-1, submissions, and if I get it to 3-0, for sure submissions. Like
you're dead in the water.
If I get you to 3-0,
3-0 probably is a submission in most situations.
For the most part. Like it's rare you'll get someone to 3-0 without submitting them.
Yeah.
And if you get them there, it doesn't really matter who you are, you're getting submitted.
Yeah. Okay. So like, I guess a good example would be like, let's talk about like closed guard, right? So I'm in your closed guard. Closed guard is such an interesting position because either the guy on the top or the guy on the bottom can have the advantage completely depending on what the alignment score. Like. Yeah. So, I mean, if I'm the guy on the top and I'm like, I've got my posture, I'm sitting up properly, my spine is pointing up, my hands are kind of like, I've got them tucked so that you can't get a dominant grip.
Yeah.
Probably I've got all 3, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Presumably the guy on the bottom, depending on what I'm doing, would have 3 or less.
Yes.
But if the guy on the bottom is like, he's pulling me down, he's pulled one of my arms separate from the rest of my body, I can no longer stand up properly.
Yep.
Suddenly my score has gone down. So the position, technically, if you want to classify it, is exactly the same. It's closed guard. But if we look at it through the alignment lens, whoever's winning and losing can be a dramatically different conversation.
Totally. Yeah. So that's where, again, like the position is less relevant than the alignment. And a good way of looking at it is in the guard, if I've just broken your posture, I probably shouldn't try to submit you.
Yeah.
Like I can maybe try to hit you with a sweep.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
But if I break your posture and I draw your elbow across your body, now I've broken your posture and your structure. That's a good time to attack an armbar. Now, if I were to dump you over onto your side a little bit where you had no base, so I've broken your posture, your structure, and your base, I'm for sure going to finish that. Like other extreme factors taken out of the equation for a second. If I get you face down, head bent, arms sticking out, I'm going to submit you.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you would have to make a pretty massive mistake in order for your opponent to recover.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And I mean, the way that I think of this whole concept is that really, if you wanted to describe to a casual person, like if my grandma came up to me and said, Steve, what is jiu-jitsu?
Yeah.
Like the way that I would probably describe it in one sentence is, it is a game of trying to maintain your alignment while breaking your opponents.
Yes.
And if the follow-up question is what is alignment, I would then say it is posture, structure, and base.
Yeah.
So that's basically
like,
all it is.
The definition that I give people in the intro before their first class, I explain all these terms, and then I say jiu-jitsu is the game or art or science, like whatever appeals to you the most. That for me, it's science. For most people, it's game or art. So jiu-jitsu is the game of utilizing frames and levers to affect our opponent's base, posture, and structure. And when we do that, we've created vulnerability. How you use that is up to you.
Cool. Yeah. So you talk about levers and frames a lot.
Yeah.
Frames, I think, is probably pretty self-explanatory to people, although there's some nuance, right?
Sure.
Like frame basically means you're relying on the solid parts of your body, usually your skeleton, to support your opponent's weight.
Yeah. If I'm using a solid part of my body that's not my skeleton, then I'm very attracted to you.
It took me a second. I wonder if you could actually use that as a frame. But there's a few
depends how many Kegels you've done.
Yeah, but there's some caveats to build onto that, right? Like for example, if I'm kind of propping you up with my forearm, that's different from if I'm straight arming you, right?
Yeah.
If my frame has joints or breakable components in it, like my wrist, then maybe in some situations that's workable, but in a lot of situations, maybe the frame frame isn't really the best situation there because the frame can be broken.
Yeah, I mean, I like that's when we get into those like the subdivision of like you can have 0.1 of base, 0.2 of base.
Yeah.
Like with a frame, I would argue that if it's not a weight bearing structure, then it's not really a good frame.
Exactly.
Right. Like it's more of a block.
Yeah.
Like I can try to block you by putting my hand up when my arm is bent. But if you push on the end of that, then it's really just a lever that's being used against me. Right. It becomes a moment arm.
Yeah. Got it. I mean, the way that I normally give this example is like, day one white belt, when he gets mounted, he's going to try and bench press the guy off of him.
Yeah.
Technically, that is a frame. You put your hand right up and you're pushing your opponent. But the problem is, it's not a good frame, right?
Because, I would argue that it's not a frame because the angle at which they do it actually makes it a lever because you're not trying to bench press. Like if I put my hands on your hips and I start pushing, that's fine. That's actually a really good frame. Because I'm not trying to bench press you at the chest. What beginners do is they push on your chest, which changes the angle
gives you a lever
in such a way that they make their arms levers. Well, so I wouldn't say that that's a frame.
To clarify, is if I am also as the guy on top, day one white belt, then it might be a frame if I just sit there and do nothing and let him bench press me. But the problem with having your arm exposed like that is a simple change of the angle turns it from your frame to my lever, right?
Yeah. So and that's really like when we talk about frames and levers, that's what the game actually is. Like we talk about alignment. Yeah, we want to affect base posture and structure, but the real like micro battles that are occurring are the frame lever battles, which is like I want a frame and you want to turn it into a lever. And there's like the better you are at setting up frames that are hard to like switch into levers, the better your defense is going to be, and the better you are as in the offensive capacity at accessing levers, but also defensively. Like you can use levers very well defensively. So it's the dynamic between frames and levers that really creates the kind of game of jiu-jitsu.
So that's actually a really good point. A lot of the time when you explain alignment to someone, they'll say, "Okay, 100% makes sense. I get it.
Yeah.
How do I actually map this down to what's happening on the battlefield? Like, how do I map this down to an individual technique?" And the way that I usually explain it is
frames and levers.
Frames
and wedges
levers.
to a lesser degree. Yeah.
So, like, to me, the alignment is the why behind jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
I think
frames and levers
is the how.
Yes.
And I think of the individual technique as the what.
Yeah.
So you kind of go through things in that order, right? I mean, I remember too, it's funny. I didn't really start thinking this way until I got to like brown belt. And I used to get just like thrown around all the time and I could never really get my, get guard the way I wanted to from both the top and the bottom. And one day I just got frustrated and I thought, you know what would happen if I just never let anyone grab me again? and I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to prioritize that. I'm not going to try and pass. I'm just not going to let any of these mofos try to grab me. And I'm just going to, and basically that's what you call a lever battle, right? I just never let someone get a lever control of me. And that made a dramatic difference to my game.
Huge. Yeah. Like when we talk about hand fighting, we're essentially talking about the frame lever battle. When we talk about range battles in jiu-jitsu, at the first, at the engagement phase, it's always a frame lever dynamic. We want to gain a grip on our opponent that gives us access to a lever or that denies our opponent access to a lever and allows us to establish a frame.
To clarify, by lever, we basically mean any handle you can get onto your opponent's body that you can use as a force multiplier.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
A lever is a force multiplier.
Yeah.
So like the example I always give people is I have them sit on their butt and lean forward and I'll try to shove them with like just using kind of like direct force and then I'll grab their ankle and hoist it up and like flip them on their back. Like that's any lever that I can use to multiply the force that I'm that I'm transmitting into your body is that's what
it's like the way I think of it is unless you're a professional wrestler, you're probably not going to be able to just like grab someone's entire body and just suplex them. But if you are a normal human being, the way that you can move someone's entire body is dominant lever control. You latch onto an arm, a leg, or the head, and then you can use that to cause a ripple effect through your opponent's body. That's normally the first thing you have to do when you're grappling is figure out what is the handle here that I can exploit.
I can remember seeing new guys grapple and generally what they try and do to their opponent is control their torso. They'll try and grab their body, which is
they'll try to hurt someone. They'll just try and grab them and just like basically move their entire body as if it were one big boulder.
Exactly. Like if you think about it, it kind of makes sense from the eyes of a beginner because you're trying to control someone's body, right?
Yeah. And this is how you learn watching Hollywood and all, that's how fight scenes
and WWF
until John Wick. That's how people thought fights looked, right?
Yeah. I remember actually, I think kind of I had a big breakthrough with you when you started developing the 2-on-1 concept just from the open guard.
Yep.
And then that really like opened my eyes to like the actual lever battles going on and the concept of like not just taking control of a lever, but like activating the lever, like using that lever to create dramatic effect, basically, as opposed to just like, just grabbing it and not actually using it to break alignment. So for me, that was like a really big game changer. And when you start to show it to people and tell people, hey, like you can use a lever as a force multiplier to control somebody's torso. And basically the way I describe it is like, if you grab their right arm or right wrist, you basically have control of that right shoulder. If you generate enough rotation, or vice versa, if you control their right leg, you can control their right hip, right?
Yeah,
and generate rotation.
And I think it's really important to add to that, because like we're always looking for ways to like clarify, right? Like any concept or any idea, notion, whatever at the beginning, as you like what you're trying to do to improve on something is just refine the depth of understanding, right? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about levers, one thing that I'm trying to kind of like expand upon, which like you'll probably see it on a forthcoming project or on BJJ Concepts, you mentioned activating the lever. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to think of like a simple way of explaining the fact that when we talk about levers in an abstract sense, like as simple machines in science, it's usually like, okay, like a teeter-totter or like a crowbar or whatever. But when we talk about the biomechanics of a human body, like how we need to activate that lever is so dependent on what the muscle structures around are doing. Yes. And so we usually talk about rotational control. So we talk about ratchet levers and stuff like that. Yeah. So we've already expanded on this idea a little bit in our concepts, but that's something that is highly like your success is highly dependent on how you control that lever, because I'm controlling the lever when I grab your forearm midway. Yeah. It's just a shitty lever. It's not one that's going to allow me a lot of mechanical advantage. The more mechanical advantage that a lever affords me. And anytime I learn from someone who like, they may not think about it in these terms, like most of the elite grapplers that I train with, they don't think about jiu-jitsu this way. They very much think about it in terms of moves. But when I learn a variation from someone that's like better than something that I've already been doing, invariably that variation involves a more efficient lever mechanic or more efficient expression of denying someone base or whatever. It's like, like the 2-on-1 thing came from me training with Eddie Cummings and him identifying like the point of the elbow as the mechanical end of the lever. And that was a huge breakthrough. And then kind of taking it and working with it and identifying the fact that when you take the wrist and you're able to rotate it and create that little bit of rotation to prevent somebody from just like denying you that lever access by closing their elbow. So like the more rotation you're able to impart to a joint, generally speaking, joints are strongest, or like, your limbs are strongest when they move in a certain plane of motion. And when you impart rotation to that, you're reducing the effectiveness of it. So like, again, it's something we talk about already, but I'm really trying to figure out a way of like explaining it better, easier, so people understand when we're trying to take these levers, we are trying to like spin them a little bit to make the lever access more effective.
The way that I normally explain it, because this is something that I kind of struggle with too. I mean, when you're talking about levers, the neck is kind of a special case. Like generally speaking, if you can grab the person's head and control it, the other guy's kind of pooch no matter what. With the arms and the legs, it gets trickier because, I mean, the human body is actually a really incredible device when it comes to compensating and recovering from error. I mean, you look at a computer. If anything goes wrong, the computer is screwed.
Totally.
With the human body, we have these incredible limbs that have 3 different joints. Like if you think of what like your legs would be like if your knee was just fused and you couldn't bend it, we'd be falling over all the time, right? The thing that makes our arms and legs so powerful is that they can turn and twist in almost any direction to compensate for incoming force. And the reason we can do that is because we've got 3 joints. What I feel, and this kind of ties into your conversation about a shitty lever, the mistake a lot of people make is when they want to grab and go for arm or leg control, they satisfy themselves by only having 1 joint. And I firmly feel that if you want to really control someone's arm or leg, you need at least 2 of those 3 joints.
That's why we talk so much about what we call ratchet levers, which is can we take your like your ankle or your wrist and use it to rotate your elbow and your shoulder or your knee and your hip. And
which requires a minimum 2 joints of control.
And those are the most powerful levers. A direct lever is never going to be as powerful as a ratchet lever. And again, these are not, like, ratchet lever is not a scientific term. It's just like an easy way to explain it, because you can explain to someone, hey, use a screwdriver and then use a ratchet. Like, one is way more powerful. So rather than going with that direct contact, we're using a ratchet to rotate someone. So,
well, I think it inherently makes more sense, right? Because if you think of, like, if I were to grab your arm right now and just try to, like, without proper armbar mechanics, just try to hyperextend it. Basically, I'm just like fighting really one joint. But if I twist your arm, I'm in order to do that, I'm controlling at least 2 joints.
Exactly.
And if I want to finish someone, like if I want to actually submit someone, I need to have all 3 joints completely locked up. This is a mistake that I used to make until actually Matt explained this to me, which I think he got from you, which is this whole conversation about how, like, when you're trying to submit a limb, basically you're trying to break a lever. The thing about our arms and our legs is, because they are so mobile and adjustable, if I pull on one joint, then that pressure is going to bleed through to the other joints. And so I have to really make sure, like, if I want to armbar you, the mistake a lot of people make is, I've got your wrist and I've got your elbow, but I'm probably not tight enough on your shoulder.
Or neck or
far
shoulder. Well, so, and just sorry to cut you off, but, like, this is why structure is the most complicated of the 3 of base partial.
It's got the most moving parts.
Variables.
The most variables, and you have to control more variables to be successful. And the more variables you add, the more complex a system is, the harder it is to get good at it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and by talking about, like, the 3 joint rule, essentially, I guess you could say, like, 3 levers as well. Like there'd be the help me out here. You're the guy who knows anatomy. There's
it's called a shoulder.
The humerus, the humerus, and then you've got the radius and the ulna in the forearm.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, the 3 levers. When I explain the concept of a lever to someone, I also sort of show them that, hey, it's not, your arm is not just one lever, even though it is. But there's multiple levers there, and I guess that's what you mean when you say, like, multiple joints.
And then you get into, like, the hand itself, which is actually really important because that's the one that imparts rotation the best, right? So when we're talking about finishing arm bars, if I'm not able to control your hand, like if I'm just controlling your wrist, there's still that hitchhiker escape.
There's no rotational.
There's some rotational escapes that people can attempt. When you control the hand and the elbow and the shoulder and the neck, man, it's really tough to get out.
And this is why stuff like Aikido generally doesn't work. Right? Hey, look, I'm sorry, but it's true, right? I mean, if I've nothing against Aikido except that it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
But if I'm just grabbing your wrist and I'm trying to throw you just with your wrist, you've got to really suck in order for that to happen, right? Now, if somehow I'm able to lock up your wrist and your elbow and your shoulder, I can move you wherever I want you to go. But if I'm just grabbing your wrist, like, you have to be charging full steam at me in order to have any chance of getting a takedown with that, right?
I mean, that's just, it's not just Aikido. Like, honestly, that stuff exists in jiu-jitsu. There are people who teach hot garbage and with the same kind of mentality as Aikido, which is like, look, stay perfectly still and I'm going to do this move on you. And that also exists in our art. It's reduced, but it exists.
So my general smell test when it comes to submissions for on the arms and the legs is, like, if you are not fully immobilizing all 3 of the major joints in that leg or in that arm, it's probably not a great submission. And if you aren't able to finish a submission, it's probably because you're not controlling one of those joints properly. Like, if your opponent is constantly spinning out of your leg locks or hitchhiker escaping, the question you have to ask yourself is, how do I control the shoulder or how do I control the hip? And in the context of jiu-jitsu, that's hard to do. Normally you do it by wedging up against the far arm or the far leg. I mean, we had a whole talk about double trouble, I think, back in episode 30, and we could go on for days about this. I guess if we were to just kind of, like, wrap this whole thing in one big package. And I understand, of course, that this is like a massive info dump for most people.
I can't let this go. I'm not a big fan of wrapping packages. I like to...
You like to leave them raw free and open? Yeah, got it. That explains a lot about actually your whole game plan and strategy. We haven't even gotten into the taint stuff. We might have to do a whole episode on that. Basically, we would say that jiu-jitsu is a game of alignment. Your goal is you keep your alignment, you break your opponents. Alignment is the why of jiu-jitsu, like why all of this stuff is happening. Alignment has 3 pieces. You've got posture, meaning, is my spine being effectively utilized? You've got structure, meaning, are my limbs being effectively utilized? And you've got base, meaning, can I create and absorb force relative to my goals? Really what you're trying to do, you want to keep all 3 of those things. You want to take them away from your opponent. the priority is keeping it for yourself. You don't want to be trying to like strip down your opponent's alignment if your own is broken.
Well, this is where like a lot of my criticisms for certain styles or approaches in jiu-jitsu is very much
sacrificing
alignment.
alignment.
They're just like, let me go for this low percentage thing, even though I'm in a crappy place because I can maybe submit you.
Yeah.
That is by far not the way to do it. The priority is your alignment.
Exactly. So when someone comes in and they say, well, okay, that's all great, but how do I map that down to individual techniques? The kind of how you do this is basically frames, wedges, and levers, right? These are the core mechanics of jiu-jitsu, and that's how you break someone's alignment or how you retain your own, right? Really, in my mind, like mostly what this means is you're probably going to be seeking your opponent's levers. You're going to be probably trying to prevent them from grabbing your own. And frames and wedges are the tools that you use to do that effectively. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a really important thing too is understanding how to recover from lever control, which is like usually if someone's going to grab you, they're going to grab around your wrist or your ankle first. It's rare that someone will get so close to you, unless, again, you kind of aren't that good, that they can get...
They're going to get the easy joint.
They're going to get the easy one. So, like if someone's controlling my sleeve, let's say, and I feel myself getting swept, the mistake that most people make at the beginning is they try to free their hand or their wrist. They try to pull back, which just creates a lot of tension and actually makes you easier to move. The simplest answer is that, provided you've got a functioning arm that bends, is use your elbow. So if you're controlling my wrist and I'm being swept to the side, I will post that elbow. So
that makes sense.
I'm essentially changing my arm from a lever into a frame. And that's a lot of the battles that you're having is that frame lever dynamic.
Yeah, this is something my instructor always used to tell me because I used to have this trouble all the time. People would grab me and I just couldn't get it back. And eventually he said, like, look, rather than trying to constantly try to grip fight and break these grips, it's far more efficient to reposition your body so that grip is no longer meaningful or helpful to your opponent.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then we haven't even touched on like proxy versus direct control as well. Like the use of how lever control works.
Piece of equipment.
Exactly.
And
and there are ways too as well that you can sort of like little tricks. I always throw out shout outs to Jonathan Thomas, who I think has some of the best gi. Like if you want quick gripping knowledge in the gi, like for me, I spent so much time doing no gi and gi was kind of in the background. And then when I started doing gi again, I was like, oh man, like I really don't know what the fuck I'm doing here when it comes to grip fighting. Like I know how to get to guards, but if my grip breaks, I don't know where to go from there. I don't know. That's kind of where you need to know like techniques, right? And sequences. So then watching him, I picked up a lot of info and he has little tricks where he'll like rotate the sleeve around your wrist in order to make it more tight and have better control.
Honestly, I wouldn't call those tricks. I would say that those are just good mechanics, right? Because that's like I don't train a tremendous amount in the gi anymore.
Maybe tricks was a bad word because I don't want to allude that there's like a magic trick
I'm being
or
pedantic,
something.
but like because I go through the same thing where like someone will come in and again, like they've been training for 8 years. They're a brown belt. And I'm like, hey, when you grab the gi, just do it like this. And they're like, oh,
I know exactly.
If you just impart this tiny twist, I'm like, because you're creating more tension.
Like,
and you're creating more friction, and et cetera, et cetera. So like, if you approach everything from the idea of how can I make this as mechanically efficient as possible, and I'm not saying that like I came up with it necessarily, but like, like if you seek that stuff out, it's available, and John Thomas is one of the best guys.
Well, let me ask a question here, because I mean, if there's one thing that someone who's never heard this stuff before, like if they were to listen to this podcast, they probably might think, man, there's a lot of material here. If only there were like a curriculum course or an instructional or an online academy that I could go to get more information. Like, because clearly this is just the tip of the iceberg. Where would you go if you wanted to learn more about all of this?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you enjoyed me giving you just the tip and you want more, go to BJJ.
The tip is never satisfying enough.
Not at all. Especially with the generous way that we lubed it. Like if you want more,
God, get it roomy.
Yeah.
Christ.
Get yourself a subscription to BJJconcepts.net. .com will get you there as well, and try it out for a month. And if you like it, we've got a few different membership options. We've got a pedagogy section, which is entirely devoted to teaching people how to teach.
And you guys are the only people I know who have actually done that.
I think so. Like to my knowledge, we are the only resource for like learning how to be a jiu-jitsu instructor online, with an established kind of like record of success for like creating good teachers within our system.
Yeah, and we're always talking about Rob's stuff on the podcast. And one thing I've mentioned before is that the BJJconcepts.net database is super easy to navigate through. I think it's one of the main things that sets it apart, aside from awesome content, but the way that it structures the lessons and makes it easy to find and navigate what you're looking for. Not to mention the pedagogy section, which is like completely unique to all other academies. It's one of the things that really stands out, and even your instructions in general with Stefan, I find are structured in a very easy to navigate way, and it kind of sets it apart from other instructionals and other online academies.
Thank you for saying that. And I have received that feedback from a lot of different sources where it's like, even, if we're like,
not to shit on like Mendez Bros, but like if you go to there, it's just a library, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard
and
to
I
find.
think most places are that. They're a library, and the way there's, and I like, again, this isn't me trying to like say it. This is just the feedback that we've received, which is like, what sets your stuff apart? Okay. One, the concepts are really concrete. There's a lot of like people who use concepts as a buzzword. They're not really teaching a proper system of concepts. It's just random concepts. It's just like the same thing as techniques. It's random. So what we've got is a really concrete set of concepts that we map onto all our lessons. So when you learn the 101 material, you're learning it through the lens of those concepts. And then when you move into the 201 material, you're learning it through that. Every module is a position. So like the feedback that we've gotten is that in terms of navigation, it's definitely set up in a way that's easy for you to just go through and learn.
Yeah,
so.
I'll say that Rob is like, he's kind of a master of the way that he plans his instructionals, and doing an instructional under like Rob's guidance. When I was doing the crab ride Berimbolo instructional, like I came up with the plan that I wanted. I'm like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it. I send it to him. He's like, yeah, dude, your structure is like, you gotta change. I'm like, I spent a lot of time on this, man. And then like that was like one of 4 drafts where finally, after like 4 or 5 different times restructuring it, it was at a point where he's like, okay, this is something that is not just good and conceptually sound, but you can like, it's structured in a way that someone who doesn't know the material will be able to take the information in at the best, most efficient way, right? So just the way that you structure your things is really user friendly, I find.
Yeah. And if the other thing too, I mean, speaking from my own personal experience, I've basically bought everything that Stefan Kesting has ever put on his store. My first exposure to you was the core formula instructional,
which is gold.
Yeah,
it is basically like, I think you've mentioned before, like for most instructors out there, it's basically like a learning guide. You could teach that at your academy and create really good grapplers.
I highly recommend that. First of all, because it's quite affordable and is very accessible. You can get that on pretty much any device you want. I mean, there's DVDs, you can get it online. I bought it on the app. But the thing I really liked about it is like it's a 4 DVD set, and the first DVD doesn't have like a single technique on it. And even on the second one, there's like barely any techniques. And that's something I appreciate, because the worst thing for me is I buy a DVD and it's like just 800 variations of some oddball technique. What I really like is hearing how people think about jiu-jitsu. So if this conversation, if you listen to this and you thought it was enlightening and you want kind of to expand upon that, that's a really good place to start. That was a very positive experience for me. So I definitely recommend that app or that instructional as well.
And I'll say this, I have quite a few instructionals. I don't get through a lot of instructionals. And that BJJ formula instructional, you can easily watch all 4 parts. It doesn't take a lot of time. You're very concise and quick with how you explain things. Not to shit on like Danaher, but like if he's going to explain Ashigarami, it takes 20 minutes, whereas you can explain it in 3 minutes, right? So I just feel like I'm not killing a bunch of my time. I only have so much time capital, right? I have a life that I need to. I can only have a small amount of time that I can take in information, and the quicker and more efficient that it's presented to me, the better. So I think
just like jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And I mean, that's like, again, occasionally people who haven't heard of me, and they're like, well, why should I get any of this guy? Like, who the fuck is this guy? He's never won worlds. He's never coached a guy who's won worlds. Like, why should I listen to anything he says? The response, and it's not my response, it's the response that I've seen, is like the added value that I provide is just that. It's the fact that it's systematized well, it's organized well, the concepts are presented in a way that's really easy for beginners to adopt, and it's concise like that, which is weird because I tend to think of myself as a guy who rambles, but I've made a pretty conscious effort in my instruction to really reduce the amount of tangents and rambling and all that, and try to be concise in how I present information, and so I've gotten incredibly like humbling but favorable comparisons to guys who I think are the best guys out there, just because of how the information is presented. And that's really all I do. Is I'm a content aggregator. I try to find the best stuff out there, and I have a way of presenting it that I think a lot of people relate to, and that, like, frankly, you know, if you're a guy who is winning worlds or trying to coach people to win at the world championship level, rightly so, your priority is trying to figure out how to coach those people, not how to present something to white belts or you know, like the average hobbyist or whatever. You're not trying to make your presentation in an instructional be the best it possibly can be, because it's not the best use of your time. I have put a tremendous amount of time and energy into trying to figure out how to present this material to people, how to teach others how to teach jiu-jitsu. And so I think that, like, if there's an added value, if there's something that I've put more energy into than those guys have, that's it. And that might be why people respond to it.
And it's worth noting that, like, your instructionals are always like, you have little moments of comic relief. It's easy to watch. Like,
there's a lot of taint stuff in there. Like, if you
talk
like
about dicks and stuff like that.
If you like John Danaher, but you're like, man, this guy's great, but I just wish he talked about my taint more often. Like, that's basically
or his.
That's basically Rob.
But yeah, like, it's actually something I haven't really noticed any other, aside from Rory. Like, you and Rory are basically the only guys on the jiu-jitsu market where you're not just like, okay, guys, this is what we're doing today. Like, and then it's just completely like all business. There's no, you know, you don't, it's like you're trying to keep it fun for the guys.
Should we explain, by the way, who this Rory person is?
Well, if they
is it worth knowing who he is?
Let's give Rory a plug, because Rory has an amazing YouTube channel, which is RVVBJJ, and he's basically teaching the same conceptual stuff that we all are, because he's my black belt, and he actually has an instructional coming out shortly with Stefan on guard retention. It's called the Guard Retention Formula. So yeah, like, if you're interested in the sort of island top team approach to jiu-jitsu, really like drilled down rabbit hole on guard retention. So, like, if you enjoyed the BJJ formula bottom game, the guard retention stuff, which a lot of feedback I've gotten has been that, like, that was the most valuable thing that people got out of it. Aside from the concepts, it's like, if there's one thing that changes people's games, it's our approach to guard retention.
For sure.
And so, like, that is now an entire instructional where Rory did kind of the same thing I did, which is study the state of the art, what's the best material, and then present it through our conceptual lens. And I'm sure there will be a certain amount of dick jokes in there.
Awesome.
Because, like, so one thing, and again, we'll probably touch on this in the other thing we do, but teaching is a presentation. It's a performance.
Yeah. It's a completely different skill set.
People don't realize that. And I'm not even talking about, like, teaching well in terms of conveying information. I'm talking about, like, the art of teaching to a camera. It's very different than teaching to a class.
Yeah. Yes.
And most people who are
it's way harder.
It is well, because you haven't done it. Yeah. It's not harder because you've been teaching class for a long time, right? Like, for myself or Rory, because of the amount of filming that we've now done for BJJ Concepts, we just go out there and we can teach to a camera, and it's really natural, which means we can show more of our personality, which, you know, that may be a good thing or a bad thing depending on our personality. But at the very least, we're comfortable enough to, like, crack jokes. And, like, and interestingly enough, like, the first material that I did with Stefan edited out a lot of the jokes because he thought that controversy would be bad. And as we've gone
look at him now.
Luckily, you can use those jokes here.
Yeah. Well, but like the lapse of time has shown him that, like, actually there are more people out there that are interested in someone being animated and funny, and
being themselves,
than just, like, being super dry and not offending.
It's hard to learn from a robot, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you said, people like stories, and when we're telling a story and we're adding humor to it, it makes it easier to consume that story. So I definitely think that's something that we do really well.
Yeah, and it should be mentioned that Rory's got a really awesome YouTube channel. Like, some of his instructional videos, the way that the videos are done, again, he uses comic relief, and just the content is, like, some of the best stuff that you'll see on YouTube. Was it
RVVBJJ? Yeah. On YouTube,
so definitely, as much as I hate you, Rory, God, you're good at jiu-jitsu. You're good at teaching jiu-jitsu. So definitely check out that YouTube channel.
And we should probably clarify too, by the way, just in case, like, anyone from the FTC is listening, we are not making any money for these endorsements. Like, we just genuinely believe this stuff. I mean, I don't even train under Rob, and I think it's good material.
This podcast doesn't make money.
We're actually losing money presenting this information. So I don't want to hear any complaints from anyone about,
which we do get. Like, you know what? From, like, last week we got a letter from a white belt. He's like, you know what? this just isn't the way that my instructor does it. It's not a good way to learn. This is criticizing you guys. We're like, dude, this is free content that we pay money to put out there.
Yeah, it's like Stefan says, if you don't like it, I'll give you a refund.
Yeah. That's the immediate.
You got it for free.
But unfortunately,
fuck right off.
Unfortunately, people aren't paying us, so we can't offer them a refund.
Yeah,
we can tell them to fuck off.
Like, you'll pay your $0 back, right? Like, yeah. I mean, what do you want to bet that guy trains under someone who's hot fucking garbage?
Yeah. Hey, he's a one stripe white belt from what I understand. So clearly he's got a lot. Well, you know what? I hate to say this because everyone's feedback is valuable, but at the same time,
that's not true. Actually, this is
it's still valuable because it has informed me about the kind of like detritus, human detritus that is out there. So I still learned something from this.
That's a good way of putting it. But there's a logical fallacy. I think it's the golden mean fallacy, or like the idea that both sides have equal representation because they have equally valid points. That's complete nonsense.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway,
got it. Okay, so we should probably tie this up. Anything else that you want to plug?
No.
Matt,
no,
what?
Oh, well,
I have something I'd like you to play.
Oh, okay. His anus. He wants me to put
I was wondering where this was going. Okay, so if you like this debacle and you thought, and in addition to what Rob has already presented, if you want more of the BJJ Mental Model stuff, as always, you can find us on bjjmentalmodels.com. That's where we've got our database. We talk in detail about a lot of the concepts that we've discussed here today. We also have our store. We would love it if you would support us. bjjmentalmodels.com/store. And if you want us to spam your inbox, bjjmentalmodels.com/join. Additionally, you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Rob, I believe Island Top Team is also.
And we also have a BJJ Concepts Instagram and Facebook now. So if you want to get on there.
Again, just short like clips of gold, just like the way a lot of like Jonathan Thomas plugging his stuff. Rob's stuff is exactly the same on bjjconcepts.net. Just great little short clips and information.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Rob. We really appreciate it.
It's been a blast.
Awesome.
All right. See you guys.
Take care, everybody. See you next time.